I actually have noticed that I've been watching a whole lot more foreign films ever since I started this challenge, but I'm not making that as a complaint. I'm just saying that it kind of surprised me that I'm seeing a whole lot more foreign films than I have noticed. I mean, I've already done a film made in France, and I've seen a film that was made in Germany. Now I'm watching a film that was made in Sweden, and by all accounts, this is actually a very good movie. It completely surprised me. It was not exactly what I was expecting, but I gotta say, that's some of the best films that I can really think of. For films to make me think one way, but it's an entirely different story, and if it's interesting enough, I'm definitely grabbing hold, and this movie is one of those movies. The Phantom Carriage. So the Phantom Carriage is a movie about the Grim Reaper. Now, for a moment, I actually thought this was going to be a horror movie because it's the Grim Reaper. He reaps souls, he collects the dead, and all that stuff. You know the exact story of the Grim Reaper. And the way that they have him in this movie, he has the sickle in his hand, and he has the robes. Basically, he looks like a condemned soul, and he drives around in this carriage that is followed by a very bony horse. And the way they filmed him in every single scene, I was half expecting him to appear out of nowhere and then there's the carriage. Well, he does do that, but the problem is you don't exactly see him kind of clearly. He has kind of like that ghost presence where you can tell that he is standing there, but you can kind of see lights or houses or tombstones right behind him, or even a road. So, in other words, it's one of the very first ghostly effects that I have actually noticed in the silent picture era of these movies that I am watching. And the way they do the ghost images, I gotta say, is insanely cool. Definitely way ahead of its time, because I have seen a whole lot of movies, especially movies with sound, near this time period where they try to pull off the ghost effects. You can see people that you can see through walking on screen, but you can definitely tell that they are standing in front of a screen. They're not necessarily in the actual picture itself. So basically, those effects have not aged well. The effects in this movie have so aged well. Like, for example, there is one guy, he dies in this movie. He basically falls down on a tombstone in a very creative way. The next thing you know, you see his soul rise out of his body, and he is sitting there as if he is actually on the tombstone right above his body. That's got to be one of the most brilliant visual effects that I have seen in a lot of movies. And in 1921, that's really saying something. Seriously, this movie had the same effects as the 1990 movie Ghost does. The only difference is this one I thought was a whole lot more interesting, because this is exactly how people would see ghosts. We know that they are spirits. They're not really there. So they do actually feel like that they are in a different dimension. Whereas for the movie Ghost, although that was definitely excellently filmed, I just didn't really get that same feeling like I did in this movie. But anyway, it's about a man named David Holmes. David Holmes he's not a good guy. He's not a good guy at all. He's a drinker and he's an abuser. Basically, his family ran away from him, even though he really did have a good life at one point. He had a happy wife. He was happy living with his wife and his brother and his kids. It was a good life. And then one of his friends shows up in his life, introduces him to alcohol, and then things start to spiral downhill. He becomes a drunk, and then crime gets involved. His family runs away, and then that was just the building blocks keep crumbling down for him, and now he is at this point. Basically, it is the final moments of his life. But anyway, he talks about a story of the friend that he had, the friend that introduced him to this entire life. Basically, last year on New Year's Eve, he talks about the story of the Grim Reaper and the carriage that collects the dead. He explains that the Grim Reaper goes to house collecting those that have passed away, even those that have committed suicide. There is a couple of suicides that happen in this movie, and basically he has no choice but to stand there, watch it, and then collect the soul. So basically he is a condemned soul that has to watch all these horrific stuff, and as well as bringing the dead to their rightful place, whether it be heaven or hell. So, in other words, he has no choice but to remain a part of the human world, and have to watch the suffering of mankind every single day. And for every single day for him, it is 100 days in one day. So, in other words, he's there for an insanely long time. However, there is a twist. The twist is that the horse and the carriage are the same one as it has been throughout history. The driver himself is different. Every single year, at the very end of the year, on Christmas Eve, the last person to die in that year is to take the Reaper's place, and he becomes the new Reaper, whereas the original goes, either, I'm pretty sure they all go to hell because they are condemned souls. And wouldn't you know it, it's actually David Holmes that dies at the hour of New Year's Eve, and surprise, surprise, it is his friend that is the Reaper. I gotta admit that one transition was really cool. However, what I really also like is that his friend is not exactly the same party goer as he used to be. No, he's more down to earth, more talking, saying that you have done bad things in your life and now you are going to reap souls for an entire year and it's just going to be insanely horrible for you. And he shows him all the glimpses and pieces that I have just been talking about that led him to this moment. It kind of reminded me of a Swedish version of A Christmas Carol. Only problem is that the only main differences is that this one takes place on New Year's Eve, and also we don't have a ghost of past, present, or future. We mostly just have visions of the past, and sometimes the present, but not the future because David's dead. He's dead. There is no future for him. But I did like the idea. That it does have those horror elements into it. I mean, the carriage that the Grim Reaper rides in this movie, it was insanely creative. Like, everything else looks like actual buildings, looks like actual places that you can probably see from Sweden, whereas the horse carriage itself looks like something out of The Nightmare Before Christmas. And so I gotta say, the visuals as well as the design on some of this stuff has got to be a top notch for it. But yeah. But anyway, the Phantom Carriage has got to be one of the most creative movies that I have seen. I was expecting like horror movie elements to it, to have a little bit of scares, because this is not the very first horror movie that I have seen on this list. And I didn't really get that out of this movie. I kind of had the same feeling like I did when I was watching A Christmas Carol. Like when I was just talking about a few moments ago when his friend is explaining all this to him. He kind of reminded me of Jacob Marley from A Christmas Carol, because Jacob Marley used to be a bad guy and now he's a ghost. He can't help people anymore. Only difference is he's talking to his friend when he's already dead. So it has the elements of A Christmas Carol, but it's not exactly a Christmas Carol. It is definitely its very own story, and it's a very creative story. It actually really surprised me the first time I saw it, and I would definitely recommend watching it again. So I gotta say, The Phantom Carriage may not sound like something that would be on your bucket list, but I do recommend watching this movie, and it is definitely worth watching at least once. So guys, The Phantom Carriage, have you seen it? What did you think of it? Whatever you thought, comment them down below. And I also to point out this one more thing, even though this is a foreign film, I'd say it's very easy to translate a silent film for more than one reason. However, this one is not exactly translated. More or less, it's still in the language of Swedish, but I'm reading subtitles at the bottom whenever the word crawl shows up. So in other words, for anyone to do a little bit of work on this movie and bring it so that more people can watch it, more people can understand it, then that would be really appreciative. Also, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share my videos as much as possible so I can finally get monetized, so I can challenge other reviewers to the same exact challenge, and I'll see you in the next video.